Hi, everyone, and welcome to Seed Speaks. This is a video series brought to you by Seed World Group. My name is Mark Zinkowitz, and I am editor with Seed World Group. And this month, we're talking with people from across our industry about the attack on science, science communication, and how we as an industry can better educate the public about what we do in order to help bolster public trust. Today, we're talking with two experts about food safety and how it's achieved through science. I'm joined today by Maria Romero Pena, formulation scientist with Active Agriscience based in Saskatchewan. As a student, she specialized in nanotechnology. Her graduate research has impacts for both the food industry and early cancer detection, and she has since brought her expertise into the world of seed treatment as a member of Active Agriscience. Welcome, Maria. I also want to introduce Jensen Cherwick, a graduate student at the University of Saskatchewan, which coincidentally is where Maria graduated from. Jensen has been awarded one of Canada's most prestigious doctoral scholarships for leading edge research into an overlooked compound formed by a toxic fungus in forage grasses and cereal grains that can be a threat to human and animal food safety. Welcome, everybody. How are you today?
Excellent.
Good, thank
Pretty
you.
happy.
Thanks so much for being on the show today. This is a topic I've wanted to cover for a while now because, like most human beings, I love to eat food and I do it every day. You both got your start in the food arena. Maria, you were able to create margarine composed only of canola oil and water, which has actually never been accomplished before in the food industry because, as we all know, oil and water don't mix. There's a lot of additives and processing involved in order to actually make margarine. So that's incredible that you were able to do that. Can you talk a little bit in layman's terms about how you did that with nanotechnology and why it's an important discovery for the industry?
Oh, thank you so much, Mark. Well, this margarine is half water and half canola oil, like the main composition. So I'm gonna start with the explanation when water and oil normally mix. So because they are not soluble between each other, they will separate, right? So there is a repulsion between them. So in a time, it don't gonna work. So in how nanotechnology comes in this kind of field is because there is one type of molecules that can be soluble in fat and also in water. And these type of molecules are called emulsifiers. So nanotechnology help us to study these type of molecules that, the properties are not very easy to see by, even for the microscope. So in this product, the canola oil-based margarine, it was used a natural emulsifier and a carbohydrate in very low concentration. So these two molecules were the ones that help us to mix the water with canola oil. So in this way, it was formed an spreadable texture and as a final product, the margarine. So this is exciting news for the margarine industry because it can be substitute the vegetable oils that have high fat, saturated fat by canola oil that, as we know, is a very good product with low saturated fat. And there are many consumers that are looking to have a more healthy lifestyle. Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine it's something that there's definitely a market for, especially among health conscious consumers who maybe want a margarine that maybe doesn't have so many additives in it. Not that there's anything wrong with current kinds of margarine, but there's always people out there that are maybe looking for a little bit something different. And so I can see why that would definitely appeal to them. Jensen, you research a fungus called ergot, which affects cereal grains and can be quite dangerous in the food supply. Over the centuries, ergot poisoning has caused things like hallucinations, convulsions, psychosis in people who consumed infected grain like wheat and rye. And it's actually linked to the Salem witch trials and other persecutions from history, which I find fascinating. Jensen, in a nutshell, can you tell us about your research with ergot and why it's important?
For sure, yeah. Thanks, Mark. So, as you mentioned, ergot has had a long, extensive history, and back then, a lot of people didn't know, why they were getting sick. And because of science, we were able to investigate what is ergot and how it causes effects. So, when ergot infects a cereal crop, there's this dark growth that forms, and it's known as an ergot body or ergot sclerotia. And within that ergot body is what's called an ergot alkaloid. So these are the chemicals that, if you consume ergot, that's what causes these adverse effects. So ergot alkaloids actually exist in two different forms, kind of two different shapes. It's known as an R form or an S form. And historically, this R form was known to cause those adverse effects. But my research is also showing that this S form may also cause those adverse effects. And interestingly, the total concentration of all these ergot alkaloids, the S epimer can actually constitute about 30% of it. So there might actually be quite a bit of this S form as well as the R form in contaminated food and feed. But however, my research is also looking at ways to detoxify this contaminated feed for the safety of human and animal health.
Is ergot poisoning something that still affects humans on a wide basis, or is it something that's more of a concern among the veterinary community these days?
Yeah, these days, the human risk is quite low. There is very minimal residues in human food, and it's more of the concern for the veterinary and livestock community.
Now, I asked you both to be on our episode today because you obviously have something in common. You both have done and do research affecting the human food supply and making it more reliable and safer. We know that consumers are often really concerned about food safety. I pulled some statistics here, and there was a Canadian study from last year that found that industry decision makers had a much higher level of trust in companies to ensure food safety at about 45% when compared to the trust that consumers have in companies to ensure food safety, which was only 18% in this survey. So only 18% of people surveyed actually trust food companies to ensure product safety. There was a US study from last year that found half of consumers who they surveyed said they are now more concerned about the safety of their food than they've ever been in the past. So people are like super worried about their food, and yet science shows something very different. There's data from the Center for Disease Control, which shows that concerted strategies by regulators and the industry at large have significantly reduced the incidence of foodborne illnesses. Now, this seems kind of counterintuitive, right? Because we're always hearing about outbreaks of foodborne illness, but the data shows that our food is actually safer than it's ever been. And we can attribute this, I think, to the fact that information travels so fast and so easily and so widely now. So when there is a food safety concern, we tend to hear about it a lot more easily than we often did in the past, right? So, Maria, let's start with you. You've applied nanotechnology to food science. And I imagine when you tell people about this, that you've applied nanotechnology to making food, that they might get a little concerned about that. It's like, oh, nanotechnology in food? Well, how does this work? That sounds, like something that might potentially, get people a little bit concerned about this. What do you tell them if they maybe are a little bit uncertain about that and concerned in regard to safety? How do you educate them about your research and sort of reassure them that, okay, nanotechnology might sound like this thing you might see in a science fiction movie, but it's actually a very good thing when it comes to ensuring food safety? How do you have that conversation?
Well, consumers' concern is understandable. Just for the sound of the word nanotechnology can bring many ideas into your mind. However, these signs help to obtain more benefits of ingredients, actually help to characterize, to identify them, to even, there are so many nutrients in the nature that they're very sensitive to different conditions. So actually, these signs help us to preserve that characteristic, that nutritional characteristics. So basically, when I say, yeah, the word nanotechnology might be scary, but it helps us to exploit, like obtain more benefits. And many scientists in my field, that is the main goal, right? Like try to work in find better ways to give a better use of the ingredients that we have, reduce the synthetic ingredients. That's the main goal right now. In terms of concern about the safety, I will say or recommend to consumers to check the label, identify the ingredients, and if it's a natural base, like a plant base or animal base, trust in that, because believe me, behind that development of these products, there is a lot of research and experiments to be accepted in the market. It's a very long process. Yeah, that will be my side. Thank you.
Yeah, I know. I've learned to trust people who are a lot smarter than me about these things, right? Because I don't know a lot about food science and all this kind of stuff, and so it's when we put our trust in people like you who've dedicated their lives to researching this and they know it's safe and they know it's effective. I think of the COVID vaccine, for example, of an area where we put our trust in people who've dedicated their lives to creating these vaccines and researching them. And so I think we can trust people that, yeah, this is safe, this is a wonderful thing, and it might be human nature sometimes to maybe get a little bit suspicious, especially if we hear a word that we don't understand, like nanotechnology. But I find if you just kind of sit with that discomfort for a minute, and I remind myself that there's people who are spending all day, every day researching these things. They know a lot more than I do about it, and if they say it's safe, and if there's a lot of research to back it up that I can look at, I can read, then that's something that really helps me to make a good choice for myself and know that these things are safe. Jensen, the same goes for you. Like when you tell people that you research a toxin, a toxic substance that can be found in cereal grains, I would think that some people might, again say, well, there's a toxin in cereal grains. Like, how do you go about kind of, again, having that discussion and reassuring them that, okay, maybe back in the 1600s when people thought that they were seeing witches back in Massachusetts, that, ergot poisoning may have been a concern back then, but we've come a long way since then. And this is not something that the average person needs to be worried about eating ergot in their grain. Like you say, it's more of a concern with livestock now. So how do you kind of reassure them about that and sort of educate them about what you do and why it's important?
Yeah, and kind of building off that topic of research, the mycotoxin and ergot research has grown extensively throughout history, and so back in the day, trying to quantify these levels of these toxins was you weren't really able to do it. But nowadays, the instruments and the sensitivity that these instruments have can detect the levels of these toxins to very low concentrations, which is really good because some of these standards are set to have you don't want a very high concentration in your food. So that research has been ongoing, and even the methods to quantify these toxins have also developed as well, and as well as even like detoxifying these methods in food and feed. So there's been ongoing research that has, allowed the government and those who set these guidelines to take that new information and to develop it into their guidelines. So, for example, like this S-epimer throughout the world and even Canada now currently might be adopting this S form of this toxin into their standards. So these, the government and stakeholders, they're constantly looking at this research, understanding it, and collaborating with researchers to help keep food the safest as possible. And also, when ergot is contaminated in a field, the grain handlers have very good and robust techniques in order to remove those ergot growths or ergot bodies from the grain. So therefore, like I mentioned earlier, it's very low residues in the food chain for human consumption.
Couple questions from our audience. I have one regarding uh, plant breeding. Now, neither of you are plant breeders
Mhm.
specifically, but you may have some insight on this. Is there any way to specifically breed for food safety to prevent things like ergot or even things like salmonella or E. coli? I'll open up the floor to you guys. Do you have any thoughts on breeding and how that could maybe help in this department?
So I guess I can go first. I
Sure.
don't know a whole lot about plant breeding, but from what I understand, I do think there are are a certain breed of say wheat and maybe other crop types that actually can be more resistant to ergot. So say if you were to grow that type of wheat, maybe you would have a lesser amount of ergot in your crop. Therefore, it would take less to clean that grain and such. So that's as far as I know for plant breeding. There are different types or breeds of plants for certain crop types that can maybe be more resistant to certain mycotoxins.
Yeah, there's a lot of different factors that come into play with different plant varieties, and so I imagine, yeah, that there are a lot of instances where you could potentially breed with creating, a safer type of food in mind, for example, right? So yeah, the sky is sort of the limit, especially when you look at new like genetic technologies like CRISPR and various gene editing techniques. It's uh, it's pretty fascinating stuff what we're actually able to do now when you look at the genome, right? In terms of natural foods, there's another question about how, for example, some people argue we should go back to eating food how it naturally is. What do you say to those people? Starting with you, Maria, when that topic comes up of natural food and oh well, I think we should go back to more natural ways of eating. What's your response to that?
Well, for years, I mean, if we go back, how was the processes before? The term natural is referred to the preservation. So before there were only like temperature, like a sterilization, like with glass, or it was very simple. But for feeding a lot of people, we have now huge population, right? The food even moved from continents. So in that way, that's how the science have to be applied because uh, we I mean hunger will be a big problem later on. If we don't apply that techniques that we are using like different preservative, like that's how we can remain food for long term. That will be the only way so far. But yeah, there have been a lot of research, like every time, like after many years there is a different ingredients that have been approved. There are testing in animals or even in humans. Is really this preservative has an impact. So the ones that are approved for all the main organizations that we accreditate a product is because there is no bad effect in humans. Nothing that is it doesn't have like a that if something that is really damaged, it won't be approved. So the things that we eat or are in our products, in food that actually we are using is because there is having a lot of research before, there is no traces in our body. However, with the time, the tendency is going more natural. We want to use more products in the nature to give a potential, right? Improve and innovation. That's now the new trend. Mhm.
Exactly. Jensen, how about you? When this concept of natural comes up, it's, this idea of natural, it looks good on a label and it can help to sell products. But again, it's, what do we mean by natural, right? Like Mother Nature is also responsible for earthquakes and hurricanes and COVID-19. And so just because something's natural doesn't necessarily mean that it's great. On the other hand, we look to natural products all the time to make all kinds of great products. So, Jensen, when that topic comes up for you, someone says, "Well, I prefer something natural." What do you say?
And kind of relating to what Maria said too, is a big thing is food security. And I wouldn't, be scared of something that, isn't natural. Like Maria said, the research has been done on it, and a lot of times it goes through extensive testings to get onto the market. And when you think about something maybe isn't natural, the way it was made or bred technically kind of is natural. The two genes, they come together and they grow, and so I wouldn't be scared of it. And a big thing is, yeah, food security. So we need to develop these new technologies in order to help feeding the world, I guess.
Exactly, and we're doing that every day. And if it wasn't for these technologies, none of us would really have any food to eat on a daily basis. I mean, we can thank these new technologies for our modern food supply. Before I let you guys go for the day, we have another question in regards to public trust. How can the industry do a better job in regards to food safety to bolster public trust? And how much is on industry for promotion versus the consumer to find the information themselves? So obviously, yeah, there's a lot of information out there that consumers can access to inform themselves about these things. But obviously, we also have responsibility as an industry too to help them with that. And so, how do we do a better job of doing that? Because I think maybe some people feel like, well, maybe we're leaving it up to them to get the information when maybe we should be a little more helpful. Starting with you, Jensen, how can we sort of, again, as an industry, improve the job that we do there?
I guess my first take would really be like transparency. So, the industry, if they're doing, a lot of these testings or new research, make that data available to the public. And, should it be on the consumer to look it up? It'd be nice for the industry to have it very openly available where it's easy for the consumer to find, or if certain subjects happen, that the industry can show it on, say, their website right away, so the consumer doesn't have to, for lack of better words, dig for the information. So yeah, just being transparent in what's going on in the food and safety chain.
And Maria, how about you? How do you think we as an industry can do a better job of making consumers feel better about what we do?
Well, I will say that sometimes it's not only the product itself, is also how you manage, the channels of um, for having in stock the product. Sometimes the people don't know how to that you cannot break the temperature, for example, something that is frozen, and that's how people get sick. So there is one app of the government. I cannot recall right now the name, but it tell you how many weeks for each product it can be in your fridge when it has been opened, reheated. So maybe that part, getting closer to the apps that the companies or the government give as an information, to be more aware how is the right way to consume a product, or even keep the good conditions. That's the most important part. um, that that will be all. Yeah.
Yeah, so you're
Yeah.
before I let you guys go, you're with Maria, as I mentioned earlier, you're with Active Agriscience now. You've brought your talents in this arena using nanotechnology into the area of seed treatment, which I know will be of huge interest to our audience. Can you quickly just give us a little snapshot of how these technologies apply to seed treatment and could potentially make seed treatments safer and more environmentally friendly, possibly?
So in active agri-science, I am focused in the improvement of the nutritional value in crops. So you mentioned about seed treatments. Right now, so far, I haven't been into the seed treatments, but I will say that my knowledge in nanotechnology, I will say we can apply this as, for example, adding essential oils, active compounds, to prevent the microbial attack during the germination stage. Um, in foliar fertilizers, actually, right now I'm working to improve or help the plants, because plants are systems that are very similar to humans. They need macronutrients and micronutrients to be strong during there is the environmental stress, the reproductive stress, the microbiological stress. So in that way, it's kind of similar. But my role is I am working in improving, like the delivery of nutrients, more resistance. That's actually what I'm working right now with the foliar fertilizers.
And Jensen, you're currently a grad student at the University of Saskatchewan. Where do you plan to take your research after you graduate? Where could this all lead you?
I think ideally I would like to stay in the realm of, the safety of, say, humans and animals. So whether that is food safety, testing for certain residues or even vitamins in food and ensuring the labels are according to, what they say, or, even drugs for the safety of humans and animals as well. So kind of staying in that realm of kind of the molecular area and just focusing on keeping, humans and animals safe. And hopefully, my toxicology background can really help with that. And it might even, toxicology is a very broad range. So it could even go into, say, pharmacology, and it could even go into food science. So something in the realms of helping and just keeping humans and animals as healthy as they can be.
Looking forward to following both of you in your careers. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you very much.
And that's all the time we have today. Thank you to our audience for spending your lunch hour with us, or part of your lunch hour. Join us next week when Sonia Begeman will do a Seed Speak session with panel guests from the American Seed Trade Association's CSS and Seed Expo in Chicago. We'll preview the episode live on Wednesday, followed by an air date on Thursday. And Sonia, our editorial director, is actually here with us right now to give you a little preview. Hi there, Sonia. What can we expect next week?
Hey, Mark. Thanks so much for letting me pop in here to tell you a little bit about what we have going on. I'm very excited. Next week, we have our first live and in-person session of Seed Speaks. If you guys are at the American Seed Trade Association show next week, please be sure to join me Thursday, December 9th at 7:15 in the morning. We'll bring the coffee. Don't worry about that. We're going to be taking a deep dive into the seed world of precision breeding. We're going to be looking at new breeding techniques or novel genomic techniques, depending on what country you're in, what you're going to call it, because these techniques showcase incredible potential if regulators are going to give these breeders the latitude to actually use this technology. Joining me during this panel is Fanley Chow of the American Seed Trade Association, Diego Riso of the Seed Association of the Americas, and Sablach Rutner of the International Seed Federation. I'm thrilled to learn more about what's going on globally. We're not just going to look at what's going on in the United States. We're really looking at this from a global scale of what new breeding techniques are looking at in terms of regulatory approvals and things like that. Because we know we're a global economy. Trade is critical. So what happens in one country has an effect on other countries. So join me for coffee and great discussion. Again, that's December 9th at 7:15 a.m. We'll be in the Tech Village, which is the Regency Ballroom West Tower. I hope to see you next week, and thank you all so much for joining us today.